Hey, thanks for coming back to the channel. This is going to be a longer video on a subject that is very serious, and I learned some things after going through some of the information, um, and it's given me pause for some things. I don't have any answers, but I'm going to tell you what we're going to be faced with. You probably more than I. Uh, and I'm giving you a look at the future out to 2050. I'll probably be taking an extended dirt nap by then, but you and your children and your grandchildren are certainly going to be affected. It is impossible not to be. Now, what you choose to do after you hear what I'm about to say is going to be very personal and disturbing for you. But we can't change the reality of what's about to happen. People talk about climate change. Climate change is just a cause for some things. The real thing that we all and you all need to pay attention to is migration change. That is the mass movement of people on the planet from one place to another. Migration of people is an extremely powerful force, especially when you have millions, hundreds of millions of humans going from one place to another. It has been the nature of all creatures on this planet, and it will be the nature of humans. Now, there's a difference between controlled migration, which in this country we saw in the Great Land Rush, when we stole all the land from the Native Americans, and then, the rest of the folks got to go and put a stake in the ground and call it theirs. And that started a lot of the Indian wars in the prairie. But the force is the same. So there are only two responses to this kind of migration. Acceptance, in which case in the demographics, this will be the demographic impact will be huge. The notion of this is my country will change. So acceptance, have things in place where when others, and I'm talking about others, migrate into the space where you are, you have mechanisms in place to accommodate that to some degree. Let's take a look inside the United States, for example, and just only take a look inside the United States right now, because we internally are going to be forced to deal with this, right? Sometimes look at Southern California. That genie is out of the bottle. Those people that live in that place, which used to be a desert, and the desert is reclaiming itself, are going to move elsewhere. Not tomorrow, but over time you will see this huge migration of people from places where they cannot survive to places where they can. I happen to live in a state where survivability from changes in climate are very high, right? And we are already seeing a migration from California to us and from other areas in the Northwest to us. Worse, in huge urban areas, you're going to start to see that. New Orleans, dead man walking. Most of the area around southern Florida, especially the coast, gone. Manhattan, gone, because it's an island. And the subways there are already flooding. the impact of people is going to be to move where they can survive. Now, we can stop. It's not stop. We can try to prevent that. How? Well, we could build a wall, right? We could build a wall. There have been many science fiction movies based on having a wall, and the ones out there, sucks to be them, the ones inside survive. Plenty of that doesn't end well, but it is a method. The real shock, and I don't know how people are going to deal with this. What happens when you don't want, when you have your place that's defined by borders? Now, let me go back a minute, and some will argue that there never were countries, and borders are a modern construct that doesn't make sense. I will argue back, and that there has always been borders, always. In the Native American in this country, they were called hunting grounds, and tribes. There were tribes, so they had identity. They had geographic identity because these hunting grounds were for their survival. It is no different. It is no different now. It's just that we were able to create a map, and we said, these hunting grounds are ours, and you name your place and so forth. Now you have places that are just no longer livable. In the Welsh area, there's an entire village where the government has told the people, just move, abandon your city. We will not help you. The same thing is going on with Key West in Florida. The same thing. The county is saying to the residents, we are no longer going to spend money to keep the roads navigable. It's too expensive. If you want to live here, raise your house on stilts and get a John boat or kayak or something, and then commute by that. I mean, that is very, very true. I mean, these people that are buying condos in Florida are brain dead. I don't know why they're doing that. Because it's not going to be livable over the longer term. The Midwest of this country is, I don't know where the food is going to come from. So the impact of people moving to safety, moving to survival, is a very powerful thing to deal with. In Northern Africa, as an example, every couple of years, there is a huge migration of males from sub-Saharan Africa up to the Mediterranean. And they go through lions and tigers and bears, and a lot of them never make it. They die en route for all kinds of reasons, but they do it. And they're mostly males. As a matter of fact, they're all males. Hundreds of thousands. It's like the wildebeest moving, I mean, it's huge. And these are humans doing this. And they get to this small little town, city, on the coast, on the northern coast of Africa. Why? And that city is surrounded by barbed wire and fences and dogs and all that stuff. Why do they go there? Because that city belongs to Spain. And Spain is part of the EU. And so once they drop a foot into that place, they now have free passage from that little place through all of Europe. The right of passage as part of the EU free movement thing. Now, let's come back to here in the United States. Right now, it is not legal for any state to bar movement of any citizen. We have free movement in this country. But what happens when migration of people overwhelms the ability of the receiving area to support them? What happens when the ethnic mix is forced to be changed? We're already seeing some of that craziness. Don't erase my, the white supremacist folks, don't erase me and all that stuff. They need to get over that, because people are being mixing anyway, so that's not going to change much. Let's talk about Russia and Siberia. Siberia a few years ago had a fire worse than the worst fire in Australia, and it burned for 3 months. It burned for 3 months as the permafrost melted. What happens to national and international stability when you can now navigate through the Arctic because the waterways are now open? How many wars are going to be fought over rite of passage and who owns the mineral rights and gas and all that stuff underneath the ocean there that you can now get to? You see where I'm going with this? Let me bring it back to you. If you live today in a place that you can forecast will be livable, you need to be prepared to defend that from those who you do not want to be there. Now, there are those that say, well, we need to change how we think. We need to get rid of borders. Yeah, good luck with that, because now you're moving into the realm of a one world government, and who gets to decide who those people are going to be, right? What kind of rules do you have? Because there's a difference between a refugee who is fleeing from things, and there's only 4 things they can flee from: climate change and being accosted by gangsters or raped if you're a woman is not a reason for refugee status. It's not. There is no such thing today. So because you can't survive where you are and you want to move somewhere else, if a country, let's say America, if we take the position as a country that says we don't care why you're coming to our border, we don't want you to force your way in here because you might die where you are. Right? We could do that. We could say, I don't care. And you just, like what happens today for the illegal immigrants, and that's what they are, and I'll call it what it is. They're illegal immigrants who take the risk to come across our southern border in the middle of the summer, and there are bodies everywhere, children, women, men, that they find in the desert because they decide they want to take that risk just to get here. They want to come here, quote, for a better life. They want to come for a better life. That is not a refugee reason. It's not even an asylum reason. So do we say we don't care? Do we say we don't care? You were born in your country, you're going to die in your country. You were born where you are, you're going to die where you are. We get to decide who we want to let into our house. Let me give you another analogy. This is back in the 50s when everybody was building bomb shelters, because we were going to get nuked and all that. And there were several science fiction movies. Families that built their bomb shelter, right? And neighbors found out. And then there was a warning that missiles were flying. And the neighbors would come and bang on the door of the bunker that was built by the people who had prepared it. Their family was safe inside. They had enough supplies to last for 2 years inside, but not enough to take the neighborhood. The agony of the decision making in those kind of movies was terrible to watch. The end result was you let the people outside die. Now, that's an option. Or you let the people outside in and reduce your ability to survive in them too. What is the right thing to do? I know my answer. I'm not going to share it on this video. But you have to think about that. Now, let's go back to that little tiny place in northern Africa where these hundreds of thousands of people, men, they literally storm the perimeter. They climb over each other just to get over the fence. Not everybody makes it. One year, the guards actually fired on the people climbing the fence and killed a bunch of them, and it caused an uproar, and so they don't do that anymore. Some would argue they should. But then you have the other people who take these boats and try to go across the Mediterranean in these boats. Half of them never make it. Half of the people that try to do it in those boats never make it, and they are never rescued. Is it that bad? You ask, is it that bad? Is it that bad? Right? Should you have a mechanism to say, if you're fleeing that, I'm going to help you come to my place. I'm going to help you come to my country. Well, you can't, because resources are finite. If you don't have enough for the people that are part of your crew, or if you're prepper, your homestead, what do? If you are a serious prepper and you have created a homestead and you have the prepper community that will come to your homestead if they don't already live there with you, and you have others show up, you will become a murderer. You will kill them before you let them overwhelm your homestead. You don't believe me? Then just be honest with yourself and go say that. Worse, well, a little better than that, you might say, if you don't have a skill that we need in the homestead, then we're going to leave you outside and the zombies are going to get you, or you're just going to die out there, because we're not going to risk our space for you. That is the kind of moral conflict that the migration challenge is going to have for all of us. For all of us. There are multi-billionaires who have already, the Bush family, the President Bush, they have bought up one of the largest water aquifers in Argentina, in South America. Water, not oil. They're oil people, but they got water now, right? Water is going to be the new gold, if it's not already in some places. You have Bill Gates buying up the largest privately owned farmland in America. Just did that. Why? Food. Another dynamic, and these are the people that are trying to socially engineer the response to the Great Migration. Acceptance. But then what they're saying is people must go into a highly concentrated urban environment. So you need to create these large cities, these large urban areas, right? So that the people can be controlled. So now you're starting to talk about control again. Well, This is America, so I'm talking about America now. Imagine us trying to go up to Canada. Now, Canada will probably become one of the more survivable locations. The northern part of the U.S. will probably become one of the more survivable locations. Okay? How do you defend that? Do you? And how do you defend that? What does government do in America? And this is one of the reasons why there's such a desperation to disarm civilians in America. Because as long as we are armed as well as we are, we can dictate terms against the Great Migration. We can even force our way into Canada. We can invade Canada if we wanted to, because there's more of us than them, and we got all the guns. That's just the way it is. So if you're Canadian, and you want to think about the Great Migration and what the impact is going to be, if we decide we want to come and take your stuff, we're going to come and take your stuff. Because we're going to survive. We have the ability to do that. Sounds bad, but at the end of the day, survival is survival. Yeah. We got two oceans that protect us from the other side. We are already seeing this huge migration from Central America to our southern border through Mexico's southern border. I can see us having some kind of treaty with Mexico that helps them protect their southern border, so all that stuff doesn't get up here. It would be terrible. It would be terrible for those that can't make it. So those are it is the great migration that's coming. Nothing we can do to stop it, because people are going to go and move for their survival. What you must do is think about what you are going to do. If you are if you are living in an area that's not going to be survivable, you need to have a strategy to move now. You need to have a strategy to move now. You need to teach your children, who will be 25, because we're talking about 2050. If they're just born, they're going to be young adults, men and women. They will need to have all of the skills to help them do their own migration if that's what they need to do. They will also need to have, if you're in a place like I am, you will have to have the skills to prevent forcible migration into your space. Now, what does that mean? It means the same thing that the Native Americans did. You came into their hunting grounds and you started doing your thing, they killed you. Or they had a war to see which group was going to take over and have the larger hunting grounds, because the food moved. And so the people needed to move to chase the food. The buffalo, for example. Food would be the great controller. Who controls the food, who controls the water, controls the people. So what does that mean? Let me come back. Climate change is just the trigger for the real thing, and that is the great migration of humans that is going to come. It's going to come. And you need to be thinking about you individually and you collectively as a group of people. Need to think about, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Do you give up your identity as a country, as a state, as a government? Do you give that up to accommodate people who are not you, to accommodate people from somewhere else? Start answering those questions. Start talking to others about that. There is the move to go to, well, who can best do that? Well, we'll have one world government. One world government. Right now, people are talking about the UN, United Nations, one world government, and they will have jurisdiction and they will allocate resources and allocate where people go. It will be a larger version of the refugee strategy. I've spent several years working with the the real refugee program, and that's different than asylum. It's different than immigration. But there is nothing in place to handle what's coming, and that is the migration of hundreds of millions of people going from this place to that place to survive. Now, if we in this country could say to Canada, there's more of us and we got all the guns, and if we need to, we'll come take your stuff. Imagine that dynamic coming to us, to our border. What border is it going to come to? Well, it's going to come to the southern border. That is the reason that we have to put controls on that southern border now. So it gives us time. It gives us time to have a more compassionate response, right? One thing I agree with Trump on is this stay in Mexico thing, where we'll deal with you, but don't be jumping in here, because then you just disappear, and we don't want to control that, and I agree with that. So, again, this was not a rant. This was some information that I researched. A lot of it came from The Guardian, which is a far left British-based thing. But it made me pause. It made me think about some things. I don't have all the answers for me personally. Frankly, I don't think I'm going to be here by the time it gets that bad. But you will, and your children will, and your grandchildren will. So start thinking about that. Talk to others. And talk to others with an open mind, right? If you, by thinking through it, come to the conclusion that you will use deadly force to prevent a migration, I mean, that's a decision that you personally and then collectively might make. I don't know that that's the right move, right? But we need to think about that, and we need to be honest with ourselves as we talk about that. The one thing that I refuse is to be forced to be compassionate. Right? Yes, compassion is a good thing to have. Empathy, sympathy, good thing to have. Violence, good thing to have. But don't try to shame me into being compassionate when I don't want to be. And I will give you the same thing. If you are a compassionate person and you want to use compassion and you want to make decisions based on that, that's okay. But when somebody holds up a dead baby and says, this is why you need to do it, I go, bury the baby. Just bury the baby. I don't care. But don't force me to do something I don't want to do. So with that, that was almost a rant, by the way. I know this was long, and if you've stuck around this long, I really appreciate it. Subscribe if you really like this. This is really focused on the prepper mindset. Hit the bell icon, and as always, where you can, carry on.